Hey everybody, it's Corey. Thank you for joining me. So, cost of living. It's probably the one thing we all have in common right now. We're all looking at the cost of living. Everything is going up. Everything is inflating. The cost of housing, the cost of groceries, the cost of utilities, the cost of insurance, the cost of healthcare, you name it, and the price is going up. If you remember, this is the second in our series of videos where we're evaluating 8 different factors that determine why people are moving to the 10 most moved to states. We first looked at the overall tax burden between our top 10 states. In this, our second video, we're going to be looking at the cost of living. And we're going to be evaluating and ranking each of those top 10 states based on how affordable or not affordable they are. We're going to be looking at several different categories from groceries to housing, utilities, transportation, healthcare, and miscellaneous spending items. If you remember, we're evaluating the top 10 states that Americans are moving to. And I have no doubt that the cost of living is on the forefront of the minds of those that are moving to other states from where they're currently at. We're going to look at these top 10 states as they rank in their cost of living, and you will know at the end of this video which of our top 10 states has the overall lowest cost of living, and then we'll do a comparison between several states that I think you'll find very interesting. All right, let's get into it. To rank our states, we will be using a cost of living index based on the research of the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center. The methodologies for creating a cost of living index are standardized in the Cost of Living Index Manual published by the Council for Community and Economic Research. All right, so what is an index and how do we use it? Well, an index is simply a way to compare data. And in our situation, the research firm took the cost of whatever it may be. In our situation here, it's going to be the cost of utilities. And they did that for all 50 states, came up with an average between all 50 states, and then they give that an index of 100. California has an index of 124.5. Well, what that means is they are 24.5% more than the national average, which gets 100. Idaho in this situation is an 80.6 index score, which is 19.4 below the average of 100. So when you combine the 19.4 below the average and the 24.5 California has above the average, you can see that California utilities are 43.9% more than Idaho. That's the combination of this number, and this allows us to compare two states for their cost of utilities. So putting real numbers to the index, let's say you live in California and you know that you average $300 a month in utility expenses. Multiply your monthly bill in California by this number, and you can see that Idaho has a monthly bill for utilities of $168, or 43.9% less than what you're paying in California. So that's what an index does for us. It allows us to compare numbers, whatever your number may be, and compare that number between states. For the purposes of our video here, we'll be looking at these criteria: groceries, housing, utilities, transportation, healthcare, and miscellaneous spending. All right, let's look at our first index and compare our top 10 states. You can see here that we're going to be looking at grocery index, and the research firm to get a grocery index looked at several different grocery items. They looked at meats, dairy products, produce, bakery products, and miscellaneous grocery products. They then came up with the average for the United States, gave it an index of 100, and you can see where the states that we're looking at came out. Florida came out with the highest index of our 10 states with a 105.4. Remember, this is 5.4% more than the national index of 100. And then you can follow these down and you can see that Texas ends up being the cheapest of our top 10 states for groceries. Well, way to go, Texas. They're actually 10% more affordable than the national average. And for the purposes of housing index, the research firm looked at the monthly principal and interest payment for a new house, and they also looked at the monthly rent for those that rent. Came up with a national average, gave it an index of 100, and you can see that Arizona had the highest cost of housing index with a 120.6, or 20.6% higher than the national average. And then next was Florida, then Idaho, and we go all the way down and we see that Alabama actually has the lowest housing cost index. And that means they're 30% lower than the national average. The utility index is based on 3 items: electricity, natural gas, and telephone service. And you can see that South Carolina came out the most expensive of our top 10 states with a 110.6 index, or 10.6% higher than the national average. And our lowest state for cost of utilities was Idaho. Idaho has 19.4% less utility cost than the national average. Looking at the cost of gasoline per gallon, and again, the source here is AAA, and I did this on the 25th of April. On that date, Arizona had the most expensive gas per gallon at just about $4.70 a gallon. Then Florida, then Idaho. The cheapest gas in the country was Alabama with $3.26 a gallon. All right, looking at the cost of healthcare index. In order for the research company to get an index here, they looked at 5 items. They look at an optometrist visit, a doctor visit, a dentist visit, a prescription, and a non-prescription medication list in each of our states. And you can see here that North Carolina came out with the most expensive healthcare index with just over 9% more than the national average. Then Florida, South Carolina, Arizona, Texas, Georgia, Idaho, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and again, Alabama came out number 1 with an index of 89.6. So they're just a little bit more than 10% more affordable than the national average. And miscellaneous items for the purposes of this research came down to consumer goods and spending, food away from home, personal hygiene care, apparel or clothing, housing goods, entertainment, and alcoholic beverages. And when all those miscellaneous items were put together and given an average or an index of 100, Arizona came out with the highest cost for miscellaneous items. Still under the national average at 99.6, but nonetheless the highest of our 10 states. And the lowest cost of miscellaneous spending came from Oklahoma, 90.4. We're getting to the point in the video that most of us have been waiting for: the overall cost of living between our top 10 states. The winner is Oklahoma at 85.8 on the index scale. That means they're just under 15% cheaper than the national average. Arizona had the highest cost of living of our 10 states, and then Florida, then Idaho, and North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and Oklahoma. Most of our states, with the exception of Florida and Arizona, came under the national average. Now, let's put some real numbers to our index. Data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says the average American household spends $5,111 a month on living expenses. That's everything that we've just looked at. We put it here, this is your national average, and you put that number to the indexes that we saw on the last slide. Someone in Arizona is going to spend $5,407 a month on all those items we talked about, whereas the national average is $5,111. Somebody in Oklahoma is going to spend $4,385 a month on those same items. That's a $1,022 difference between Oklahoma and Arizona. That's not insignificant. That pretty much ends up being $12,000 a year. And somebody that's price sensitive and deciding where to relocate would look at Arizona as $1,000 a month more expensive and may decide to move to Oklahoma. Let's have a little fun here. These are the top 5 most expensive and least expensive states in our country. And this is based again on that cost of living index. Hawaii is the most expensive state in our country. Then DC, then Massachusetts, then California, and then New York. Now, the 5 most affordable states. Georgia came out number 5, Alabama 4, Kansas 3, Oklahoma number 2, and Mississippi came out number 1. I love that 3 of the top 5 are the states that we are evaluating. Must be a coincidence. We're going to compare California based on their overall cost of living index to Oklahoma. Now remember, California was one of our most expensive states, and Oklahoma, for our purposes, is the least expensive state that Americans are moving to in that top 10 category. It is the second least expensive state in the country. But if we take these index numbers and we look at the difference, so remember California is 37.6% more than the national average for their cost of living. Oklahoma is 14.2% below the national average. In other words, California has a cost of living that is 51.8% more than Oklahoma. Well, if we put numbers to that, remember the national average of expenditures is 5,111. If we multiply that number by California's 37.6, costs $7,033 for a Californian for their monthly expenditures. And for an Oklahoman, they spend $4,385 for the same thing that the California spends for. And look at the difference. The difference between California and Oklahoma is $2,648 per month. So Oklahoma is that much cheaper than California. Let's look at California compared to Idaho for the overall cost of living. Again, California has a 37.6 average above the national average. Californians pay on average $7,033 a month for their cost of living. You do the same thing with Idaho, and they're spending $5,091 for their monthly cost of living. That's a difference between California and Idaho of $1,942 a month. That's close to $24,000 a year that somebody living in Idaho pays less than if they had stayed in California. Thanks for following up to this point. Hopefully this video has given you some clarity as to which of our states have the most affordable cost of living, and you now know how to use an index in which you can compare different states to each other if you're looking for a place to move based on its overall cost of living. And coming up, we have our third video in the series. You'll want to make sure that you hit the notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss it. That video, we're going to be looking at the economic stability and job growth in each of our top 10 most moved to states. That's it for now. Thanks for following.